This is all hip hop, everybody. Chuck Creekmer here with Mr. Carl Dix. Now, first of all, Carl, can you tell people a little bit about yourself and who you are and some things? I will say this: I met you. Well, I first became aware of you. I think many moons ago. You did something, a speaking engagement with Dr. Cornel West, and I came out for that event, and that was my first. Um, I guess initiation of knowing who you were through Dr. West. Can you tell folks a little bit more?
Yeah, that was a series of dialogues that I did with Cornell on what was the road forward for the liberation of Black people. I think we began that series of dialogues just after the election of Obama in 2008. I am a longtime revolutionary. I reach back to the 1960s. Uh, I refused to go to Vietnam while I was in the U.S. military. I was one of the Fort Lewis six GIs who refused orders to go to Vietnam. I did so because I could see that the war was wrong, and I was influenced by the movements of the 1960s. I remember Stokely Carmichael saying, "Ain't no good reason for no black man to go fight some yellow men for the white supremacist system that's ruling over us." And I said, the brother calling good money. I think I got to move on it. I went to Fort Leavenworth Military Penitentiary for taking that stand. And I came out looking for the revolution. I hooked up with it, became a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and I have been on the revolutionary communist tip ever since. I am an advocate for the new communism of Bob Avakian. I have taken on police brutality. I co-founded the October 22nd Coalition to Stop Police Brutality, Repression, and the Criminalization of a Generation in 1996 and 2011. I co-initiated with Cornel West the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. And in December of 2016, I was a co-initiator of refusefascism.org. That kind of pulls a lot of it together.
Okay. Um, hmm. So when people hear communism or any reference to it, it's a buzzword.
Mhm.
What does it mean for you, and what and as you represent that?
What communism is it's the all the way answer to the problems of capitalism. Because this capitalist imperialist system that we live under and that has subjected people to horror after horror, talking specifically about Black people, dragged from Africa in slave chains, several centuries of slavery. Slavery gets formally ended, but then it becomes slavery by another name, Jim Crow segregation, lynch mob terror. A movement erupts in the 1960s among Black people that breaks through all of that. But then what you end up with is first fired, last hired, first fired in the factories, segregated in the cities, subjected to police terror. And then as they start moving their factories around the world, they got all these Black people in the inner cities that they ain't got no more use for. And then you get mass incarceration. And all of that is a product of capitalism. We got to get rid of this system. And what communism is a system where the factories, the farms, the mines, everything that produces the wealth and products that a society needs are collectively owned, not the individual property of Rockefeller or Ford or all that kind of stuff,
Right.
but owned by the people and operated by the people. So it's the people deciding what we're going to produce, how we're going to produce it, not to make the most money, but to meet the needs of the society. And I should say that communism has gone through developments, and the most recent development is the new communism by Bob Avakian. People should go to the website revcom.us and check out the writings of Avakian on the science of communism. And especially right now, they should check out his writings on the fascist Trump Pence regime and how to drive it out, because that is what humanity is up against.
Yeah.
And Refuse Fascism is something that brings together a whole array of people. It's got communists like me in it. It's got Democrats, people who work for Hillary Clinton in the last election. It's got people of various religious backgrounds. Cornel West is one of the co-initiators. And as you may remember him saying when we talked, he considers himself a free, Jesus-loving black man. And we got this kind of breath. We'll even take some anti-Trump Republicans in this, because we got to stop. No, we got to stop this regime, because they're hammering the final fascist nails in the coffin of basic rights in this country. And we got to stop it before they pull it off.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you stand? I mean, obviously, I know that you're against Trump, but in terms of the election, what are your thoughts? Do you think that the Democrats or Joe Biden will win in the November elections? It just seems almost like ridiculous to even ask the question, but from a landscape standpoint, obviously, um, you know, Joe Biden is not against capitalism, for
Oh, he
example.
certainly isn't. He certainly
Right.
is not. Let me just answer that this way. I am going to be voting in my first presidential election of my life, and I'm 72 years old. So I had a lot of chances before,
Uh-huh.
and I always would not do it because I saw both parties representing the same system. Now,
Uh-huh.
today, it's still the case. The Democrats and the Republicans both represent the capitalist system. And on one level, Bob Avakian says in a statement on this election, he says, Biden and the Democrats are in no way fundamentally different or better than the Republicans, except that they are not part of a fascist movement working to close down the space in society for dissent, for protest, and for building resistance to the horrors that the system brings down.
Right.
So, what we are saying is people should vote for Biden, not because we expect he will do things for people, but we know what the Trump Pence regime will do. When you look at this dude getting up there and saying, I ain't going to accept the peaceful transfer of power if I lose, when he calls out to his white supremacist thugs like the Proud Boys to stand by, when he tells his people to go into the polling places and look at what people are doing in there, which is his way of saying, go in there and intimidate the people who might vote against me. This
Right.
is what this guy's doing. He's saying there ain't going to be no room for doing stuff that I don't like.
Uh-huh.
And if we allow that to happen, we'll be like the folks in Germany who were saying, let Hitler go and do his thing, and then we'll get into power after him, which is what the communists in Germany said. They
Right.
said, knock Hitler uns, which is German for after Hitler us. And what they
Mm.
didn't realize was Hitler was bringing the hammer down once he got in. And once he got in, consolidated power, he busted up the Communist Party, put the communists in the camps. Then he moved on to put the socialists and the trade unionists in the camps. And then he moved on to put the Jews and the gypsies in the camps. And were it not for the fact that there were powerful countries outside of Germany, that's what beat fascism in Germany. And right now we're in a situation where there ain't no powerful countries that can set this country right. It's up to us here
Mm.
to stop this and to come together to stop it before it gets to the point where the space to stop it has been closed down.
Got you. So let's fast forward to now.
Okay.
As you know, we're in a on a hip hop platform, hip hop site,
Mhm.
and we've seen a number of artists, hip hop rappers, artists, whatever, endorsing Trump, or it feels like help. Ice Cube, for example, has not outwardly endorsed Trump, but has helped, if you will. I don't know how much that help is, but just for argument's sake, let's say helped a little bit. But it just seems, I'm not gonna lie, it just seems odd to me. Um, I've seen some of your tweets. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what are your overall thoughts with Ice Cube and then just some of the others as well? I don't know how many of them you're familiar with.
Okay, let me start with 50 Cent. Because what 50 basically says is what's in it for this black man, meaning himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he endorsed Trump, because his taxes are lower under Trump, because Trump is favoring the super wealthy in society. 50 ain't saying, what about all those other black people in society?
Mm-hmm.
What is this going to mean for them? He's saying, what is this going to mean for me?
Right.
And see, that is just craven selfishness. Look out for me, step on all the little people to get what's best for me.
Right.
That's how I dismiss that one. Now, Ice Cube got to deal with this. Ice Cube is coming from the perspective, and he says, I'm going at this in terms of what's in this for black people. But look, Ice Cube is wrong. That's all I can say about that. Because here he is saying, I'm going to deal with this dude who led the lynch mob on the Central Park Five back in the 1980s, 1990s, when they got exonerated by the court, when the evidence came forward that they had been innocent all along. Trump said they should still be in jail. He don't care if they were innocent. They should still be in jail. We can move up a little bit. We can move up to like Charlottesville in 2017, when the Klan and Nazis went down there to protest and were beating up people who were counter protesting and even killed one of the counter protesters. Trump looks at the Klansmen and the Nazis and sees very fine people among them. And I was there. I know there wasn't no innocent, naive people who wandered into that by mistake. These were people who were raising the banner of the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis, and Trump sees fine people among them. And he saw them because those people supported him. And we could run it all the way up. After the cops shot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Trump went to Kenosha, not to talk with the Blake family or to talk with Blake, because Blake did survive that attempt to murder him. He went there to meet with the Kenosha police and to congratulate them on the fine job they were doing. And this is in keeping and in character for him, because he has said Trump loves cops and cops love Trump. He has said cops should not be so nice to the people that they arrest. And he's talking about cops who we've seen video after video of them murdering people, brutalizing people. And he's saying, don't be so nice. In other words, more brutality, more murder. This is what this man stands for. And you go to this man and say, I want you to do this because I'm looking at what's in it for black people. What is in it for black people is more viciousness coming from the state. And you can just look at it in every direction. Look at the coronavirus pandemic, the disproportionate way that black people, that Latinos, that indigenous people are among the highest percentages of people who are getting sick and dying from this pandemic, because a lot of them work in these frontline things that you can't, if you're in a meat packing plant, like a lot of the Latinos are, you can't do that virtually. You can't get on Zoom and cut up the meat. You got to go there. If you're a transit worker in New York, and one of my neighbors was a transit worker in New York, you can't drive that bus on Zoom. You got to get out there, and that exposes you to this virus. All of this stuff is what's going down. You can't, and you go to somebody who is presiding over all of that and say, I want to work with you because I think there's something in this for black people. You're actually throwing a lifeline to Trump, whether you endorse him or not, because you know what he's going to do with it. He's going to trumpet it and use it to try to chip some black votes away from the Democrats and create the kind of situation where he can make a contest of the election. And then he's also told you, even if I lose, I ain't giving up.
Uh-huh.
And right now, I'm actually issuing a statement around voter suppression, and I'm looking at what they're doing. They are, where they have control of the states, they're passing laws and enacting policies that make it harder for black people to vote. Like in Florida, a ballot initiative reversed the longstanding policy of denying the right to vote to people who had been convicted of felonies. So these former felons could now vote. Then the legislature says, oh, well, you can't vote until you pay your fines and fees from your case. Then they raised the money to pay the fines and the fees. They shouldn't have passed that law anyway, because the voters had spoken, and the voters didn't say pay your fines and fees and you could vote. They said you could vote. But they passed this law to get in the way. It was a new poll tax. They raised the money to pay the fines and the fees. And then the state of Florida said, well, you can't pay the fines and fees because we don't know what they are. Now, and they went into court with this. They said, we don't know what the fines and fees are, so they can't pay them, so they can't vote. In other words, our incompetence is now the reason you can't vote. And the courts, with judges appointed by Trump, endorsed this legal approach. This is what you're dealing with. They are doing everything they can to cling to power. And in that situation, you don't throw a lifeline to them.
Right.
You know, that's the heart of it and the heart of what's wrong. The other part of what's wrong is, look, even if he was going to give something to black people, and Trump has shown that that's exactly not what you expect from him, but even if he was going to throw a bone your way, you got to look at what he's doing overall. They have immigrant children in cages on the border. They ripped them from their parents' arms, put them in cages. Now, with 545 of them, they cannot find their parents to reunite this family. And Trump gets up in the debate and says, oh, they're being taken care of so nice. How nice is it to rip a child from their mother's arms or their father's arms, separate them? You know, some of the kids were as young as 2 years old. You're traumatizing these children. Don't tell me you're treating them nice. You know, this is what this dude does. They're aiming at a woman's right to choose to have an abortion, packing Christian fascist judges on the Supreme Court who are going to take that right away, and who are also his last line of defense to keep his ass from getting kicked out of the White House, because he wants to throw enough dust on the election that he can confuse it and claim that it wasn't legitimate, get it in the courts, and then get it to the Supreme Court, where he, like George W. Bush, can win the only election that he needs to. This is all what's going down right now. And you throwing this guy a lifeline, even if you didn't endorse him, by saying, I'm working with him on this economic program, then he gets to say, well, I'm working with Ice Cube. And then maybe some black people will get taken in by that. And then it also gives white people, oh, well, he's working with Ice Cube, then he ain't really a racist. So then I can vote for him because I think my 401k will come out better. And see, I would say to somebody whose 401k might come out better, would you say under Hitler, my 401k is going up, so I don't mind what he's doing to the Jews? Because that's what we're dealing with. And we have to act to stop it. And Refuse Fascism, which I'm on the national editorial board for, we're going to be launching an effort to sound the alarm on this voter suppression, because we have this slogan, white supremacy plus stealing the election equals fascism. Trump, Pence out now. This is the stand that people need to be taking, not seeing if they can cut a deal with Trump. And especially you shouldn't be trying to cut a deal with Trump because the man's a proven liar. The words out of his mouth prove he's a liar. He's going to promise you something right now and ain't going to come up with it. You know, so you're being taken in. In addition to the fact that you shouldn't be looking to work with the dude, you should recognize he fooling you. He's
Now,
hoodwinking
now,
you. He's
now, Q,
bamboozling you.
now Q will say the Biden campaign didn't meet with him. He also says that his plan is largely about economics, and that the Dems oftentimes focus on social justice, but he's talking reparations and other economic incentives. Uh, and one of the things that I guess Trump sort of put in his platinum plan, which is so highly offensive, I might add, just had to say it. This 500 billion, uh, to I believe black businesses, but don't quote me. Um, there's one about black businesses and something along the lines of that number. But what do you say to that?
Well, what I
The economics of it, not necessarily the um, social justice, the police brutality, these things, um, which are sort of, I won't say it's easy to reconcile as far as the Dems are concerned, because that's absolutely important. But the economics are important as well.
okay, let me say two things. The first thing is that you are getting played here because the 500 billion is to small businesses, I believe,
Uh-huh.
and I don't even expect them to come through with that
Uh-huh.
because when they came up with the first act to keep things going during the pandemic, a lot of that money got siphoned off to things that are not small businesses. And Trump is known for this because Trump used to get Small Business Association loans,
Uh,
claiming
right.
he's a billionaire. I don't know if he is or not, but
Right.
claiming to be a billionaire, but filing for small business loans and getting them.
Yeah.
This is how this man operates. So don't expect that money is really going to come, you
Yeah.
know. And then the other thing is, look, the economics of the situation that black people are in is a product of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
That is real. That is the history of black people in America. So then don't tell me that capitalism is going to get us out of this. It will get a few of us out, like 50 cents. I mean, he has made it, you know, and okay, I ain't mad at him for making it. I am mad at him for saying my making it at the expense of the rest of y'all getting messed over is fine with me. Then I got a problem with you. But I ain't got no problem with, you know, an artist who has been successful or, you know, somebody who's been successful in some other realm. Don't take your success on the backs of the wreckage that the system brings down on the rest of us. And that's what this system will do unless and until we make a revolution, which is why I have been a revolutionary all my life and why we in the Revolutionary Communist Party are building a movement for an actual revolution. So I want to say that. The other thing I'll say on the Democrats is that they do represent the same system. Now, they have a different program for keeping it in effect. And right now, those two programs that between them and the Republicans, the difference between them matters
Uh-huh.
because I mean Trump is telling you he even said if people protest the night of the election, I will crush them in a minute.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
he has already called out federal agents that he sent to Portland and Kansas City and some other places to show you what he means. And he has told these fascist white supremacist militias, you know, when he was asked to say, tell them to stand down, instead he said, stand by.
Right.
And, you know, I know what stand by means. That means be on alert.
Yeah, of
You
course.
will get your marching orders in a minute.
Right.
Be
Right.
ready for them. And those
Definitely.
marching orders will bring them against people fighting for justice.
Yeah.
That is just the stand. That's just the deal.
Now, let me ask you this two-part question.
Okay.
Why, in your opinion, is Trump appealing to some black men? And do you think this is propaganda? Is this something that's been created in click farms, seeded in click farms, or is he really resonating? I personally don't know any black men. Well, I know a couple that feel very adverse towards the Democratic Party, and then therefore it matriculates to some affinity for Trump for being honest, or what have you, or not honest, but like just being frank or telling it like it is, or things like that. Do you feel like that black men are in reality, feeling this guy, or is he just, or are they creating this perception?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, or a lot of both. Let me just say this, because even with this talk of Trump is building up his vote among black men, let's be clear, black men are the demographic with the second highest percentage of people who going to vote against him. The only demographic that's going to vote more than black men against Donald Trump is black women. Credit
Right.
to the sisters there. Let me just
Yes.
say that. Credit to them, because they are looking at the reality for what it is.
Yeah.
Now, there are some black, because there was a gap between black men and black women in 2016, and they might widen that a little bit because, they did bring out Herschel Walker
Yeah.
and a few other black athletes and performers. And now they got 50 Cent's endorsing and Ice Cube working with him. And this can bring a few more people, but it is still going to be the case that black men are the second largest demographic by percentage voting against Donald Trump.
Right.
One reason for this gap is one of the things the sisters see that a few of the brothers don't see is that in addition to hating black people, this man hates women.
Yes.
And he is very clear with that hatred. He looks at the vice presidential debate, and his summation of Kamala Harris is that she's a monster. Well, what does that mean? It
Right.
means she's a black woman who did not know her place, saw fit to disagree with her better in Mike Pence.
Uh-huh.
And the only way you can see Mike Pence as her better is if you have a male supremacist view, because there's not very much good to say about Mike Pence
Yeah.
on any level as far as I'm concerned. But here was this black woman who would not let Mike Pence talk all over her,
Uh-huh.
shut her up, shut her down. She stood up to that. So it's clear that you're talking about a regime that hates black people, hates Latinos, hates immigrants,
Uh-huh.
hates the indigenous people, and hates women. And some of the brothers can be like, oh, well, but I can get mine in here.
Yeah.
That woman hating thing is something that a lot of the sisters and some of the brothers, a lot of brothers do see it too. More brothers need to see that, because people need to see that it ain't about me, or it ain't about people who are just like me in terms of any particular aspect of who you think you are. It needs to be about humanity. And
Uh-huh.
when you see somebody who is coming at humanity the way this regime is, you got to stand against it, even if they ain't hit you yet. Because Gil
Right.
Scott Heron said, I forget the exact song back in the 1970s, that if you let injustice surround your home, in a minute it'd be in your living room.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
that has been the reality historically. That's how it went
Uh-huh.
down in Germany. And people was kind of like, oh, he's coming after the communists, but hey, I ain't a communist. He's
Yeah.
coming after the socialists. I ain't a socialist. He's coming after the trade unionists. I work a professional job. He's coming
Mm-hmm.
after the Jews. Well, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And then when you
Right.
get right down to it, then he comes after the Christians, and it's like, ain't nobody left
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah. No,
stand with me. And we can't get down to that. That's why Refuse Fascism has called for day after day protests in cities across the country. We call people to come out in the streets and stay in the streets, raising the demand, Trump, Pence out now. And that's why I'm moving on this voter suppression end, because white supremacy plus voter suppression and stealing the elections equals fascism. And fascism is not something you want to personally experience.
Yeah,
You
no
know,
doubt.
it's bad enough to read about it and see what they did. I don't want to personally experience it. And they are moving to take stuff in this country back 100 years.
Yeah,
They want to go back to that time when, you know, because they said in 1857, black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. Well, today they're saying black people have no voting rights that the Trump Pence regime is bound to respect because they're moving on them in all levels. You know, they telling you, well, every county gets one place to drop off the early ballots. Well, you in a county with 2 million people who are mostly black and Latino, you get one place to drop off early voting. This is Texas.
yeah,
You in a
right, right.
mostly white county with 40,000 people, you get one box. And they say, oh, well, that's cool. Everybody's equal. No, they ain't.
Right.
40,000 people on one box is a lot different than 2 million on one. And I've seen the cars lining up.
Yeah,
And then you see
definitely.
the actual voting thing and the people standing in line. It takes you in places in Georgia 11 hours to
Yeah.
vote if you're in a black area. And you come
Hmm.
in and out in 15, 20 minutes if you're in a white area. They are
Yeah,
telling you where you fit in. And
yeah.
if you want a society where you matter, where black lives matter, where other lives matter, then you got to get rid of this regime because this regime is telling you you don't matter, you don't count.
Y-
And
One thing Ice Cube said, since you've been at this for so long, he said, nobody's done it so far. So I mean, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but he said something to the effect that folks before him have tried or been at it for a very long time and have not been able to make the change that we want to see. What's your take on that? And I'll ask you the other question after that. But what is your take on that? Because I found that interesting, and I think it's something. I mean, for example, I think it's part of the reason why Trump is in office because a lot of people are like, hey, let's go with this guy. He's different. He's a dark horse. He's not a politician. He's not one of the folks that we've seen time and time again at this, whether it's politics or fighting for what you call the liberation of Black people.
okay, let me start with what you said right at the end, why people went with Trump. And there was that thing of he's different. He's not a politician. But what was also bound up with that is, and it don't bother me that he's a racist.
Uh-huh.
And that was a lot of the people who went with Trump because you couldn't miss it.
Right.
It wasn't like he was hiding
Right.
anywhere.
Yeah.
He came down that escalator and said, Mexicans are dope dealers and racists, and I suppose some of them might be fine people. In other words, he's
Mm-hmm.
clear about the dope dealers and rapists, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's some nice ones in there. He talking about a court case, and he said this Mexican judge can't give me a fair hearing. And
Right.
you ask him why, and he said because he's Mexican. Now you
Mm-hmm.
actually look at it, this guy is as Mexican as Trump was German. Because you go back to Trump's
Yeah.
grandfather,
I know.
he came from Germany. Well, this judge's
His name's
grandfather,
Drumpf, by the way. They
yeah,
changed it.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You know, this judge, his grandfather came from Mexico.
Yeah.
And Trump is saying, but see, the difference was, well, hey, Germany, Europe, that's cool.
Yeah.
Mexico, that's S-hole. That's what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
You know, then he lets you know when that's when people ask him about the Central Park Five being exonerated, and he's like, they should still be in jail. He's telling you where he was coming from. But for a lot of the people who were saying he's different, he's not a politician, he's a successful businessman, they were also saying, and it don't bother me that he's a hidebound racist.
Yeah.
That's all right with me. So there's that. But on Ice Cube's point about people have been trying this and not succeeding, he has this thing that I'm rethinking the approach. but actually he is retreading it because a number of people have worked at, we're going to reform capitalism until it works for Black people. And the fundamental problem with that is that the problems that Black people face are built into the very framework and foundation of this capitalist imperialist system. And you can work at reforming it. People got elected, people got into businesses, people did different kinds of things. And some people succeeded, but the masses of Black people remain ground down by this system. And that's the problem with Ice Cube's approach. And even within his contract, when he gets to the question of financing, he says, well, while capitalism is a fine system, Black people don't have enough capital. And that's because the way capitalism works, it concentrates capital somewhere. And what Ice Cube is basically saying is, you got to let some of us in on this deal. But even if they did let some of us in on the deal, how does capitalism work? By exploiting the majority of people. And the rest of us would stay down here, even if they let some people in. And frankly, I don't think Trump is planning on letting very many people in. You know,
not
so I
even
think
one
that's what
Black
we're up
judge, by the
against.
way.
Yeah. I mean, you can just look at this dude and say, nothing good is going to come from Black people from this source. And that's what Cube is looking past and thinking, well, I'm doing this in a way that it's going to work this time.
Right.
And the record shows, both in general and then in particular with Donald Trump, that it ain't going to work in a good way.
Okay. Have you you mentioned Cube's plan? Have you reviewed his plan? And what do
Yes,
you?
I have looked at his plan. I mean, I didn't write up or develop an in-depth thing around it because I thought the main point was to say that right now, in the face of this critical point for humanity with whether or not the Trump Pence regime is going to be able to stay in power by hook or by crook, the main problem was this lifeline that it throws to them. And we can, in the aftermath of the whirlwind, we can talk about strengths and weaknesses in it. And I would mainly see weaknesses because of that fundamental thing of, we're going to reform this system to work for us. But at this point, I'm definitely trying to put my arms around and get together with people who want to reform the system to raise the question of, we got to stop this fascist hammer that's about to come down. And then we can debate and discuss our differences in the wake of doing that.
Gotcha. Is have you another thing with Ice Cube is he's been building politic, and that's a hip hop word, with the ADOS organization. I'm having a brain freeze now. Descendants of American
descendants of slavery.
Yes, America. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
No, it happens. I'm knowledgeable of that. You know, at my age, it happens a bit to me every now and then.
Yeah, I'm getting up there myself. Their agenda is a little bit different, but essentially, I believe it centers on reparations. What are your thoughts overall on ADOS and the idea of reparations? I think it's pretty clear Black people deserve reparations. I mean,
yeah, yes,
everyone.
I mean, this is something that we've spoken on quite a bit, and reparations for Black people is a just demand. And in fact, it is not possible for this system to pay for the savage exploitation and vicious oppression that it has brought down on Black people. There ain't enough money to pay for that.
Yeah.
That's a just demand. And in fact, in our Constitution for a Future Socialist Republic in North America, we address that both in terms of reparatory steps, including financial and others, taken towards black people, but also the right of black people to form a separate independent nation if that's the desires of black people. We would welcome more the largest possible united socialist country, but we recognize that black people are here because of the horrors of imperialism, not by some conscious choice. People were not on a tourist ship and decided to stay. They were on a slave ship. And it's got to be open for people to decide where they want to go off of that. So that's what we say about that. We're for reparations. But my problem with the ADOS movement is that it does get narrow. When they start out on this thing of what's in it for black people, then it becomes, but there's some black people that ain't us, because they're not American descendants of slavery. And that can come up a lot in a place like New York where I am, because a lot of the black folks who you run into on an everyday basis, but you also engage in the struggle against injustice. Well, their slave ship stopped in the Caribbean.
Right.
Or their slave ship stopped in South America. And for some of them, they didn't even come over during slavery. Amadou Diallo was murdered by the police, but he wasn't a descendant of slavery. But Amadou Diallo is part of the we that I embrace and am a part of. And I, in fact, embrace all of humanity on that level. Anybody who's standing up against injustice, I'm standing with you. So that's my question about the ADOS movement, their tendency to narrow it down. And then when they take up the question of reparations, you still got to tie it to how do we end this hell that's coming down on the people, not how do we get a payoff because of it. Because if you do that, if you limit it to that, even if you're successful, you get a payoff, but you're still within the system that was responsible for all those horrors. And I don't think the system going to willingly pay. That's the other thing about it. But even if they did, you're still within the system, and it is reproducing the hell that came down on you to start with. I think reparations is a just demand. To really get to the point where we can talk about that, we got to get rid of the system that committed all the horrors that you want the reparations for.
Okay. Do you feel optimistic for the future? How do you feel generally?
Well, generally, how does Cornel put it? Hope on a tightrope. No, we're up against a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Everything that we have fought for, a lot of stuff we fought for is being taken back. And they were taking it back on the installment plan. Because none of this stuff started with Trump. It all started before him. But it's being brought to a certain nodal point. And they are now at the point where a lot of this stuff can be taken back, not on the installment plan. They're just going to come and get it all.
Yeah.
And that is the horror that we're up against. I am hopeful, but not optimistic, because there are a lot of people who don't want to see this happen. The problem is that they mostly don't see what to do about it. I look at the people who stood in line for 11, 12 hours in Georgia to vote. They did that because they see something at stake here. Yeah. So they're voting like their life depends on it.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, this guy is stealing the election and basically telling you, I don't care how the vote comes out. I'm still going to win.
Yeah.
And so you have to vote like your life depends on it, but then you can't leave it at voting. That's why Refuse Fascism issued these calls for being in the streets day after day, calling on others to join with it. If what's motivating you is Black lives need to matter, well, that's a righteous struggle, and you should carry that forward. But you got to connect it to Trump, Pence out now, because if they get what they want, if Trump succeeds in clinging to power, where do you think he's going to stand on Black Lives Matter? Where is he going to stand on immigrants' rights? Where is he going to stand on the environment? Is he going to stand on a woman's right to choose to have an abortion? Where is he going to stand on LGBTQ rights?
Right.
He's going to stand against all of that.
Yeah.
So we have to drive this guy out. A lot of people have reason to be a part of doing that, but we have to get people to see that we can't wait and see what he's going to do, because he's actually already doing what he's going to do. He's not going to steal the election come November 3rd. He's stealing it right now.
Right. Yeah.
And when there's a robbery in progress, you don't say, well, let's wait till the end and see how it comes out.
Right.
You'd be like, stop that dude from jacking that stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's what we up against. He jacking our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's doing it right out in front of us.
Exactly. And that's, part of the issue that's come up with Cube is that, it's a month or two before the election and weeks even now. And it's already fully in progress, even down to the tremendous amount of voting that's already occurred early. So a lot of the issues are moot when people are voting in the millions and things of that nature, so it's very late. I hope that we can unify, though, because the divide and conquer seems to be at an all-time high right now. We have so many fragmented views and positions, but the other side is very, very on code, if you will, with what they want to do. And even if they don't agree, a lot of them will stay in their space just because they don't want to jump outside of what their mission is, what their agenda is. So what are your thoughts on that? In terms of the unity or lack of among people, among Black people, but also people of color, even poor people.
Yeah, I mean, that is a part of the reality, and it's part of what we're working against and working to overcome, and trying to get people to see that what we're up against should bring us together. And even if we're not on the same page in the long haul, we need to be on the same page in the immediate,
Right.
because the immediate can end up foreclosing the long haul.
Yeah.
If they bring this fascist hammer down, and they're carrying out, we call it a rolling fascist coup. Because it's not like it's going to happen all at once on November 4th or something like that. It's been happening. It will continue to happen, and it will be taken to another level on November 3rd and gone ahead with, unless we're acting to stop it. And we got to start now. We got to mobilize and organize. People got to get in the streets. I really encourage folks checking out this interview to go to the website refusefascism.org. The activities of the effort to stop this rolling fascist coup will be featured there. And go to the website revcom.us, because some of the best writing analyzing fascism, its history, where it came from, but also what we need to do in the present, is being done there, especially by Bob Avakian, the leader of the revolution and the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party. And let's get together in the streets. If you ain't with me on revolution, are you with me in being against a fascist America being enforced on humanity? Because it will be the whole world that pays for this if this country goes fascist. Because the dude has said again and again, if we have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them?
Right.
And that by itself should have you saying,
yeah,
we don't want this guy nowhere near.
Yeah.
We don't want him to be nowhere near that nuclear button. And that's where he is right now.
Well, I wrote an article, and I'm a comic nerd, a sci-fi nerd, and all that. So I have to process this in terms of supervillains. And I wrote a piece. Being Black in America is like a Star Wars movie, but we don't have a Luke Skywalker. I'm waiting. Where's Luke? But it's very hard to process for me sometimes, because it's really a mind-blowing sort of turn of events. Mr. Carl Dix, I appreciate your time. Do you have any final words for folks?
Okay, well, my final words, I actually just said them. Go to the
Yeah.
website, refusefascism.org, look at what's going down and get involved with it. And go to the website, revcom.us. And when you go to those websites, look for the effort that we're doing against voter suppression, support it, get involved in it. We might be coming to your area if you were one of them areas where they stealing people's right to vote right out in public, whether they're doing it through the legal system or doing it through fascist mobs on the street. Check us out because we might come to your area and you can get down with us in the nitty gritty with it. You know, and we're aiming to do, let me just be clear, nonviolent direct action. That's what we're planning on doing. And we need people to be involved in that. We need people to support it.
Thanks for everything you do. I appreciate the fact that you are very that you picked a side. You know, a lot of people, uh, I just don't believe in dealing with folks that are evil or folks that are um, violently racist or incite violent racism. You can be racist, but that's your prerogative. But I think that we have to unify. I appreciate that you are preaching unity along this very specific matter, getting Pence and Trump out of office, and I think that's something we can all agree on, and we should all agree on.
Yeah, we definitely should.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I thank you for your time. We'll work hard to get this up. Prayerfully Monday.
Monday, okay.
Hopefully by Monday, and that's about it, man.
Okay, you surprised me by how long we talked.
Oh yeah. Well,
I wasn't sure how long we were gonna go.
my guy Greg, he tends to want them to be a little shorter. But I like, I'm a journalist. I'm an actual, journalist, and I like to talk to people, man. When I was writing for magazines, I would talk to somebody for hours and hours and hours, and then I would just listen and extract, pieces and bits and stuff. So I like to talk to people, and I think it's important, man. When we switch, I think we're going to do a different show. Well, my hope is to do a show in the new year, and that show will be formatted much differently. So we'll have to either edit something like this down very to a much hot take or whatever, or and maybe release the whole thing later, or it'll be produced in a way that we'll just have to keep it very quick and to the point. But yeah, it's changed a lot. The internet's changed a lot, and the presentation is a lot. So getting someone to listen to an hour is a lot for most viewers. But it's for me, it's better to have that conversation than not to have it, and then we can sort of piece it together and lead people to the full interview as needed. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. But
Okay,
thanks.
so is this going to go up in full interview format, or are you going to piece it and lead to a?
This video will be in full with an introduction of sorts, probably a 200-word intro, and then the video will be embedded on the site pretty much in full. This stuff we're saying right here,
Yeah, I figured.
it's gonna be cut, but the rest will be there right up until basically where I say your last word. I wish I could cut that ADOS part out where I had a full brain freeze, but
Well, you can cut it out. I mean, the technology to do it exists.
yeah,
That's up to you.
Well, we keep it raw, but we might edit it. But
Okay.
for the most part, it'll be this combo.
Okay.
Yep. All right, man. Well, thank you for your time, and we'll keep fighting. I don't know what's wrong with my people. Some of them. I'm trying to be objective, but oh boy, yeah. I have. This again is off the record, but there's a lot of otherness going on with some of these guys too, and Trump and them are literally working very resolutely behind the scenes to get these cosigns and endorsements financially,
Hmm.
in some instances, business wise, in some instances, and some other in some other ways to get favor from the hip hop audience, and it's from top to bottom, from your 50 cents on down to your almost like your very like underground producers. So I guess they figure if we can get a guy who has a 10,000 person audience, that's 10,000 or plus people that may not vote at all, or may vote for Trump, or may hate the Democrats, and that's
Hmm.
seems to be working, because we're the, there's always a price that someone can be bought. Yep. So, all righty. Well, thanks for your
Okay.
time. We'll,
Thank you for having me on.
yeah, no doubt. You be safe.
Okay. You too.